South Africa is battling an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. It's hit farms in the Free State, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, the Northwest and Gauteng. Now, the Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development Minister recently met with stakeholders in the livestock industry. Let's bring in Minister Thoko Didiza to take us through what was discussed. Thank you very much, Minister, for your time today. So, foot and mouth disease broke out in March and steps were taken immediately to quarantine certain farms in the Northwest, and other steps were also taken in Limpopo. But we know that this is a highly contagious disease, and now we have cases across the country. What is government's plan to contain the disease, and what additional resources will be deployed?
Well, thank you very much to you and your listeners. And indeed, firstly, I would want to assure South Africans that we do have red meat that is healthy, that can be consumed, and I would like to encourage South Africans that let's support our livestock industry, because it is important not only for our proteins in terms of nutrition, but also it's important in order to increase our revenue as the country. We are indeed battling the foot and mouth disease, and I want to say that we have contained most of it. We have actually had a discussion with the livestock industry, which include the livestock red meat industry. It also includes the abattoirs, it includes the auctioneers, it also includes the breeders and those who are farming with livestock, all of whom are part of the National Red Meat Forum, which we are engaging on as government. We've also agreed that the culling that we've started with in a farm in Gauteng, as well as in the Northwestern Free State, is an important and immediate step that government has undertaken, working with the industry to ensure that we secure those provinces that have not had foot and mouth disease for a very, very long time. We are vaccinating in KZN in Umkhanyakude district, where we've got a disaster management area. And as a result of the floods, we've actually deployed our surveillance team to make sure that we can assess whether there has been any movement of those animals in the area around the disease management.
Minister, I'd like to get to a little bit more about the vaccination and the culling of animals a little bit later, but I'd like to start off, if we can, just talking specifically about resources, state veterinarians and animal health technicians. Yes. Do we have sufficient boots on the ground in all areas for your strategy to be effective?
We have boots on the ground who are veterinarians, who are actually mobilizing private veterinarians as well as animal health technicians to actually assist in the maintenance and containment of the disease. So with what we have, we're actually adding more.
Great, that's good news. The efforts to contain and eradicate foot and mouth disease, we know, will only be successful if all stakeholders work together and comply with protocols. But, of course, you've seen some farmers who are seemingly unwilling to suffer the loss of culling these animals, and they decide to try and move them out of an area affected, and they do that illegally in order to sell them. And government is reliant to some extent on self-regulation by farmers. But how are you going to ensure compliance?
It's actually both self-regulation but also government regulation in ensuring that there's compliance. As I speak, there's already a case where one of the herders who was responsible for the movement of those animals from Limpopo, there's a case actually which has been lodged, and he will be prosecuted in terms of the Animal Disease Act, because it's important that we are able to actually deal with those who are contravening the legislation. We're also stepping out our movement controls to make sure that no movement of animals goes out of any area, not just in Limpopo or anywhere else, but across the country without any permitting system, because that would allow us to know how to trace the movement of those animals and also be able to make sure that any animal that moves from any area is free of a disease.
Let's talk a little bit more about the culling of animals. You said that that's going to be taking place in Gauteng. Will that be implemented in all cases where foot and mouth is identified?
It has already happened in Gauteng. What we usually do in those farms that we've already picked up that there is a disease, particularly in Northwest and Free State, we vaccinate. We wait for 7 days for the virus to actually get lessened in terms of its toxicity. We then move those animals into a designated abattoir for slaughtering and culling. So that's what we are busy with now. And that's what we've agreed with the industry to actually do, so that your Limpopo, your Gauteng, your Northwest and Free State provinces, we've already ensured that we do not have animals that have got this disease in those areas.
Tell us a little bit more about the regulations around vaccination. As I understand it, only department officials or licensed officials can do these vaccinations. Is that correct?
As I indicated earlier, government officials working with the private veterinarians, because all the veterinarians, whether they're working in the state or outside, are actually registered vets. But they would work with the department to make sure that we vaccinate in the areas where we need to vaccinate, like we are doing in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Limpopo area.
For consumers, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I just want to get some more clarity for those watching who might be concerned. The safety of meat products is paramount. When animals are culled,
yes,
what is done with the carcasses, and can that specific meat be sold for consumption safely?
Let me just indicate to you that actually foot and mouth disease, in terms of its impact on consumption, once an animal has been vaccinated and has, finished all the protocols, that meat can actually be eaten, consumed. But as I indicate to you, that we've agreed on a particular protocol to make sure that we do not have concerns among our citizens about the safety of our meat. And it's actually few areas where we've had this challenge. The livestock industry in South Africa is much bigger. So there are many areas and many farms, even in those provinces where certain farms are affected, that meat is actually safe for consumption.
In areas where farmers sell directly to local communities for consumption, what protocols are going to be put in place there? Well,
as indicated to you, for any movement of animal from one point to the other, we require protocols, which therefore means any movement of those animals is secured, is known that it doesn't have any form of disease that can have an impact on human life, to actually ensure meat safety for citizens. And we actually are increasing our communication with communities, particularly in those areas that are affected, so that they themselves, even without government, they can be able to engage the people who are selling to them, about the health of their animals, and can be able to check with our veterinarians close to where they are.
KZN has additional challenges at the moment in the wake of flooding there. What's the plan to ensure that foot and mouth disease is given the necessary urgent attention in that province?
As I indicated to you Wednesday, the surveillance team, which includes our officials, veterinarians, as well as the industry, has actually had a meeting and started doing the surveillance area to check that the animals that are not in the disaster management area are actually safe and have not been affected with whatever movement that might have been occasioned by the floods.
Auction houses, as you pointed out, are a point of congregation, and that makes them vulnerable, regardless of how good their biosecurity is, because they have no way of guaranteeing that farmers apply the same biosecurity principles before bringing animals to an auction. How do they fit into government's planning around foot and mouth disease, and have you had the necessary buy-in from auction houses to assist you in eradicating this disease?
As I indicated earlier, that the meeting we had the Animal Health Forum includes farmers who are farming with livestock, your animal breeders, your abattoirs, your auctioneers. So all of these stakeholders are part and parcel of the containment as well as the management of the disease as I'm talking to you right now. And they've always been, not only with foot and mouth, but any other livestock-related diseases. We work together with these stakeholders because they're the backbone of ensuring that we have safe and quality livestock products in South Africa. One of the things that the auctioneers have agreed to us in the meeting on Wednesday is that they on their own will make sure, firstly, that they work with our veterinarians to ensure that the animals that come to the auctions are actually checked. We have got clinical tests that we do to actually see that there is no challenge with the animal concern. If we identify anything, those animals will already be isolated from the herd that goes to the auction and are actually tested and dealt with in accordance with the protocol, so that you make sure that animals that comes to the auction do not become spreaders, as we had seen in 2019 in one of our auctions in Limpopo, for instance, in Global.
The disease can linger on clothing, on equipment, on vehicles transporting animals, and that further complicates containment. What protocols should farmers and their workers follow to ensure that they're not spreading the disease themselves, even when they're not moving animals from place to place?
In the livestock industry, for instance, we make sure that farmers, whether you farm with poultry or any livestock, to make sure that you manage your biosecurity or your animal health properly. You do have the footpaths to make sure that when you enter the space, because we may not know when you come from outside a particular farm, whether you are not coming from a farm that has got particular diseases. So it's important that farmers adhere to those protocols. You have the footpath, and immediately when you get closer to the animals that you have to deal with, you have to actually undertake spraying or even changing your garments so that you get the necessary garments that are properly used in those facilities, which have actually been sterilized to make sure that you protect your animals. You will see that more often in the poultry industry. In the livestock, because it's largely on open field, we still have those footpaths, and even on the areas where we actually manage and control, cars that go through those disaster management area or go out are actually sprayed, and even individuals are asked to come out and put their foot on the footpaths to make sure that they don't carry the disease outside of the disaster management area. And to that extent, it's important for me to appeal to our communities that they work with government and the industry in complying, when they are asked to do so, so that they don't look only at being delayed and irritated, but must understand that this is necessary to make sure that we do not spread the disease in the areas that do not have any disease at the moment.
Thank you very much for your time. That was Minister Thoko Didiza from the Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development Department.